Welcome to WGON Legends. Tonight's guest, Jeff Monahan, actor in Day of the Dead, Monkey Shines, The Dark Half, and Bruiser.
Well, basically, when I was growing up, there were only a few channels on television, and because I'm old, so the thing is that at that time, if you wanted to watch a movie, whatever happened to be on, that's what you're going to be watching. So I think I was exposed to like films from different decades, back to the 30s, and even sometimes it was on Channel 13, there would be silent movies. So I think one of the things that's fallen by the wayside today is everybody watches the latest thing, and they don't always explore older things. So I used to watch a lot of movies when I was growing up. I only have one brother. He's 11 years older, so I sort of was raised as an only child. And my dad was a big movie fan, and so I just grew up watching them. And so since I was I was by myself a lot, I would watch movies. And I must have had ADD or something in terms of reading, because it wasn't until like I was 15 years old that I could read a book. I just couldn't maintain the attention that long. Now I read constantly, but up until that age, I wasn't able to really sit long enough to read a book. But big fan of movies from that. And then there was Chiller Theater with Laurie Cardill's dad, Bill Cardell, from Night of the Living Dead, and that was on every Saturday night at 11:30. So I would be up until 3 o'clock in the morning watching Chiller Theater. So became a big horror fan that way.
So I'm guessing that's how you first discovered George Romero, Chiller Theater?
Yeah, I saw like so many things, so many different films, through the years. Mostly what I remember are like the old Universal classics, the Frankenstein and Wolfman and the Mummy, and I would buy Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and Creepy and Eerie, and I had the attention span for those, but Night of the Living Dead came a little bit later on for me. But once I saw that was quite shocking. So I knew about George Romero, and I didn't actually meet him until I went to see Creepshow in Monroeville, and he was at the theater for the premiere.
Was it the Cinemet East, the one or I believe that's what it was called, in the parking lot of the Monroeville Mall?
It wasn't in the parking lot of the mall. It was across the street and across the highway and up a ways. I can't remember what the name of the movie theater was, but it was a pretty big multiplex, and we had gone to see it, and George was there, and they had a mock-up of The Crate, and I just went over to say hi, like a blithering fanboy, and Chris was with him, and she got caught in a sort of a window blind rope or something as I walked up, so I helped her disengage herself, and so that was my intro. I don't really remember what anybody said, but it was like I just wanted to say hello, and I really liked the movie. One of those things.
So when you said you discovered Night of the Living Dead, around what year are we talking?
Well, that was all through the 60s. Okay. Growing up, I was born in 59, so growing up through the 60s and the 70s, I watched Chiller Theater every Saturday night. So when I first saw Night of the Living Dead, not sure when it would have been, but it was in that era of growing up and just watching all of those things, and that sort of just became my main focal point of the week, because I wasn't like into school or anything at that time. I didn't have too many friends. I was very shy, very quiet, and all that changed later. But during that phase, I was just like this little geek boy, which with his Creepy and Eerie and Famous Monsters and Chiller Theater, and that was my life. That's what really kept me going throughout the week. So I would look forward to Saturday night and staying up by myself and watching Chiller. So it was really stayed saved me, I think, in a way. It gave me a focus.
So, did you catch any of George's films between Night and Creepshow?
Well, we saw Dawn of the Dead, which was a big, just a shocker. I was dating my wife at the time, and we had gone to see Dawn, and were just totally blown away by it. And I remember that it opened so violently. You're just hit with so much violence and the effects for that time in movie history. That was such a in-your-face bloodbath, and it opened so violently, I think, just to sort of like get you used to that, and till you settle down into the drama of it. And we laughed a lot. I remember we just laughed like crazy through it and had a great time. And then I took her home afterwards, and I had given her a large blue teddy bear that we got at some park or something, and she woke up in the middle of the night, and lying next to her in the bed was a blue bear with the eyes staring right at her. And having seen Dawn of the Dead, she screamed, and her mother swore she was never allowed to date me again. Yeah. So, but that was a big influence.
So, how did you get into acting?
Since I was such a big movie fan, I thought I would be an actor. But I was talked out of that for all the right reasons. Just like how hard it is to make a living, and it's crazy, and it's a pipe dream, so don't do that. So I went off and I became a police officer, and I did that for a few years. And while I was a police officer, I got involved in undercover narcotics. And I had done a couple of plays before any of that started, just like local community theater things, and I really loved it, but I was convinced I could never make a living at it, and so that's why I got into police work. But when I got into undercover narcotics, I had done that for a while and successfully, and I realized that I was acting. I had a different name, I was out buying cocaine, I was doing, and I thought, hey, I must be okay at it because nobody's killed me. And so maybe I can do this. And so I sort of just shifted careers at that point, crazily. But, it was, I always say I was really happy that I did that profession. And then I was also very happy that I left it when I did. So otherwise I wouldn't have had all these experiences since then. So. There was a 10th grade teacher, Miss Griffin, who now I think lives in Monroeville, and she, we had English class, and she had a 6-week break in our English class, and she had a class called Creative Dramatics in 10th grade, and we had to memorize a bit of Shakespeare. We had to get together in groups of 3 and write a play and act in it. And I remember the other 2 people I was partnered with, they didn't want to do it, so I wrote it, and I played an alcoholic boxer, but it was like I was getting these little bites of the acting bug then. And for those 6 weeks, I stopped being shy. Girls started noticing me. I mean, it was just, that was really cool. And then I went right back into my shell once we went back into regular English class. But I had these little moments of it before deciding to just take the plunge when I was in my mid-20s.
What was the acting scene like in Pittsburgh at that point?
In Pittsburgh, when I first started doing things, there was a lot of theater, and there still is, which is really good and really gratifying. And I studied with a guy named Charles Waxberg, who was wonderful and had come out of Carnegie Mellon. And he was moving to New York, and he set me up with a professional class in Pittsburgh with a woman named Liz Orion. And Liz was head of the drama program at Carnegie Mellon. And so it was a private class for equity actors only, and I should not have been allowed in it, but he put in a word for me, and I got to join all of these professional actors, equity actors, and that was like my first time after Charles after Chuck Waxberg, studying that way, and it was really eye-opening. But there were a lot of theaters, and I just started auditioning around. And I worked at the Pittsburgh Playhouse. I did the Pittsburgh Playhouse main stage. I did the traveling troupe that they had that we went to schools and did Fall of the House with Usher and Mark Twain and all sorts of plays traveling around. Worked at Heartwood Acres, the Three Rivers Shakespeare Festival. So there was a lot of theater. It's a really good town for that. I got my equity card at the Pittsburgh Public Theater, doing She Stoops to Conquer there. And so I just kept studying. I worked with a guy named Glenn Gress, who was teaching. He had a theater company that was turning equity, so they ended up not being able to sustain that very long, but I did Tobacco Road there, and I played the Baptist in Salome, and I was seen doing that by a guy named Bill Gardner, who was running the Public Theater, and he had me come over to the Public to do an audition, and that's how I got my equity card. But it's always been a good theater town, and so it's like there's always been a lot of talent in Pittsburgh, and so that's been very gratifying.
I have to ask, while working in the Pittsburgh theater scene, did you ever have a chance to work with Ray Lane?
Yes. I did a play called The Time of Your Life with Ray. It's like a 3-hour William Soroyan play. John Amplis directed it from Martin. And so it was like this big cast play, and it was a very fun experience because the play's really, really long. And Ray talked really, really slowly. So it was longer. And once you were on stage, once your character came on stage, it was a bar, and you never left. You just stayed there. And if the scenes would shift between different characters, you would find bits of business and things like that to keep you going. And during the run, there was a Steeler football game, Super Bowl or some big game, and the play's set in the 1930s, but you couldn't have a TV anywhere there. But Dave Butler, who was the bartender, brought in a television, put it underneath the bar so the audience couldn't see it with the sound down. So during an entire matinee performance, we'd always find ways to gather around the bar and watch television while Ray Lane talked and really slowly. But he was a wonderful, wonderful actor and a really nice guy.
Now, how did you transition from the theater scene into working on films, specifically starting out with George Romero's Day of the Dead?
Well, I've always been fascinated by movies, and in those days, the whole idea of a movie was really sexy and really exciting and really scary because you had these huge Panavision cameras, and it wasn't cheap, and it wasn't like today when everybody just whips out a cell phone and makes their own movie. It was, to do a movie was like going to the moon. It was like really crazy, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I really didn't. I was just beginning in so many ways, business-wise, or even learning anything. And I was fascinated with the movie thing. I was fascinated with George and all that. So at 247 Fort Pitt Boulevard, I still remember the address, that was Laurel Entertainment. And I went in, and I wanted to audition for Day of the Dead. And I just went in, and I wanted... let me audition, and I didn't get a call. There was no agent sending me or anything. And there was a really nice lady there. I don't know who she was, but we became friends for a while afterwards. But she said, "Oh, here, read this." So she had me read from Steel, believe it or not. And I was this skinny, geeky, completely unlike Gary Clark person. And it must have been, I'm sure it was just awful, but that was here, maybe just to get me out of the office, but I read the scene with Steel, something about blowing people apart with a machine gun or something, and then she says, "What, you want to come back? You want to come in and be a zombie?" I thought, okay, that was a great audition. So, but they were filming, and it was up and running and all that stuff, and I just pushed to get seen for something, anything. So I went to Wampum, with the mine where they were filming, and the first day they had all of those zombies in like this blue makeup, were like way down this tunnel, and Lori and a couple of the other guys are trying to get away. It's when they're locked on the zombie side by Steele or whoever, and we're struggling to get them. And it's the day of slow walking zombies, so we're trying to get there quickly, but we're the slow walking zombies, and we're really highly motivated because the closer we get to the camera, the better seen we can be, but you can't really run as a zombie in those days. So it was great fun. We were paid like $1. That was like, and you got a hat. But after that day, the lady who I had auditioned for, she said, "You want to come back and be a featured zombie?" I said, yeah. So I went back and I did, Chris Romero called me Broccoli Man. The makeup guy was Howard Berger. And so they did this great makeup job on me. I got to get shot in the head after I grabbed the hat off of Steele's head. He shoots me. George actually shoved me through the doorway on cue to do that. And so it was just great fun. And I had that incredible makeup job. And I remember as I was getting the makeup job, they had a squib hole rig on my head and front and back. And I don't know if it was Tom or Greg Nicotero that was working with Howard Berger, but they put the explosive charge on my forehead, and that so it would blow out, and then they covered it with a latex piece, and they were doing all the makeup covering that, and Howard ran outside and got some lichen and brought it in and was gluing it to my face as like I was a drowning victim type of looking thing. And as they were completing the makeup, they started talking amongst themselves and said, "Which way did you face the explosive? Is it facing in or out?" And it was like, I think it's facing the right way. Yeah, it's facing. I'm pretty sure. And I'm sitting there thinking, if you aimed it in, it's going into my head. The gunpowder is going to blow into my head. That's, And then they just laughed because they were teasing me the entire time. But that was just a great experience. I was so excited.
So how many days did you end up spending on set?
Just 2, as far as I can recall. It was the first day of just being, hey, be a zombie, and then I don't know what worked out well enough with that. It was just, I was there, I was interested in everything that was going on, and the casting lady who had seen me at first said, "Hey, if you want to come back and do it again, we'll have you do one of the cooler zombie parts." And I was like, yeah, I'm there. But they killed me, so that was it for that one. But so it's most likely just the 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
What was the atmosphere like between the makeup portion and then actually being out there and seeing George direct?
The makeup thing was just really, really effective, very efficient. I remember they had a bunch of mask pieces hanging on the wall. They had chairs around. They were doing different stages of makeup. I think they had like 3 different stages of makeup, depending upon how close you were to camera, and the most advanced ones, like I ended up being shot in the head. Being on set was, George's sets were always completely relaxed. He was very, it sounds like a cliche, so many people have said it, but he was just a big teddy bear. He was just very self-effacing. He wore his scarf, his famous scarf, and he was just really fun and relaxed. And it was just like, we're all doing this together. There was no sort of hierarchy feel to it whatsoever, and no pressure, no nerves, nothing like that on any of the sets I was ever on with him from George or the crew. It was just always very, very relaxed. The dark half was a little strange because Timothy Hutton was a little different because he was playing 2 parts, so that was a little bit of a weird experience. But all of George's sets were always completely relaxed.
And what did you think about Day of the Dead once you saw it?
I loved it. I remember at first I thought, first time I saw it, I thought it wasn't as claustrophobic as the first 2 because you know how big a farmhouse is, and you know what the size of a mall is, and so I was wondering about you didn't exactly know where these tunnels led, and the claustrophobia was not as intense for me. I remember the first time I saw it, but it's been one of those movies, and I've heard this from other people too, that it grows on you in such a way the more times you see it. And I've known people who say it's their favorite of the trilogy, and it's really grown on me the more times I've seen it over the years. And it does have the claustrophobia, and it's of course the effects got better as the years went on, and I just really I loved it the first time, and I've loved it more as the years have gone by. And a great cast. Joe Pilato and I had done a play together at Carnegie Mellon Metro, and he played a sort of Columbo and Lieutenant Columbo type of character, very comedic, and so very different than what he did in Day. And John Amplis was great to be around, and Lori and I have been friends ever since. And so it was a really fun experience, and I really liked the movie a lot. It's one of my favorites.
We see that you're credited on Two Evil Eyes, but we're not exactly.
But I'm not in it. Somebody told me I might be in the European version, but I haven't gone over there to watch it. Dario Argento directed the segment that I was in. I did a scene with Harvey Keitel, and there was a section of that story where Harvey is going around and shooting crime scenes. And there was all of these different crime scenes, and Tom Savini, I know, was involved in the makeup, and they were like all these cool, gushy, gory things that he was shooting. And the scene that I was in, I was a police officer with another police officer, and we were taking a body out of, she was stuffed up a chimney in somebody's living room, and taking the body out, and Harvey was shooting, and I just remember thinking as they were filming it, the way the camera moved, you could just tell as we pulled the body down, the camera went back across the floor, really low to the floor, and it was this very cinematic thing. And Dario Argento is directing that segment, and Dario is just a wild guy, and I couldn't wait to see it because I knew it felt like it was going to look really cool. But they ended up, what I heard was they just had shot extra murder scenes, and as they were showing that section of the movie, it was like, well, we had to lose a couple of the murder scenes. So that was unfortunate, and it wasn't even so much that I wanted to see me. I just wanted to see what that camera move really looked like on screen, because I knew it was really, really neat. But never got to see that. But Dario was a lot of fun. Didn't speak a lot of English. At one point, he was doing something strange with a big white fluffy dog. He was like, "This is fun. Everybody's like, look at this and laugh, ha ha." And everybody looked at him like, "That's not funny." We were all looking at him like, "No, you're just okay." But he was very nice. I think his brother was somehow involved in the production, so that was a disappointment for me, though, for that.
How did working with Dario compare to working with George?
Dario was like you plugged him in. He was like he was just wired, and they were both great, but in very, very different styles. Dario was bouncy all over the place, and doing things and saying things in Italian, and just for everybody, and just directing it with his hands of just this, we're going to do this, and sweep, and blah, blah, blah. George is just hanging out and having a laugh and enjoying watching you do stuff and being complimentary, and very different. But all directors, have their own style and approach to it. But they were pretty much polar opposites.
And you didn't have any chance to observe any of the proceedings with Romero's story with Two Evil Eyes?
No, I wasn't around when he did that. I really enjoyed that one, and I worked with Bingo on stage and film things that we did together, and Bingo was one of my favorite people in the world, I really enjoyed the Black that was the Black Cat and the Case of M. Valdemar.
Right.
That's the one Bingo did, but I wasn't around for that one.
So for Two Evil Eyes, I was watching it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm having a hard time finding you. Are you like blended in the background?
Two Evil Eyes?
I'm sorry, not Two Evil Eyes, The Dark Half.
Oh, The Dark Half, I am, character's name was Wes. I'm a telephone. I was much heavier then. and it's been years since I've seen it, but I thought, my God, you're a fat boy. But I was wearing a green sweater. I'm hooking up Timothy Hutton's telephone for a wiretap because Stark keeps calling Timothy Hutton, and he's like, this guy keeps calling, and I'm there, and I think it was Jeff Howell was in the basement hooking things up, and I'm in the living room, and so while I'm hooking up his phone, Stark actually calls, and I'm on the other line listening, and Timothy Hutton's telling me, he knows you're there. He knows you're there, and I'm like, he can't really know I'm here because I'm not connected. So there was just that little scene there, but that was a long day. Timothy Hutton was very into trying all these different ways of doing things, so he did it again and again and again and again. And I remember Amy Madigan was there. I did another film with her called The Prince of Pennsylvania with Keanu Reeves. But Amy was married to Ed Harris, is, as far as I know, still married to Ed Harris. And but she was there for that scene as well. She's a sweetheart. She was really always so nice.
Did you happen to witness any of the difficulties between Romero and Hutton?
Yeah, I mistook it because I was still very green. I had not really done any movie things too much, at that point. And Timothy is a wonderful actor, and he was dealing with a very difficult job at the time, doing two parts, and really putting himself into it. He'd won the Oscar for Ordinary People and all of that. But I remember I looked at him at one point as we were doing this scene together, and he turned to George and referring to me, just sort of gesturing to me. But he asked George, he said to George, he says, I don't know what he's doing. And I thought, like what am I doing wrong? What am I doing? And I felt badly about that for years. But then when we did Bruiser, George and I spent a lot of time together, and he told me stories that I won't repeat. But Timothy was basically busting everybody's chops, especially George's. Had some major difficulties just trying to get through it. But he was just on edge, trying to get everything right. But for a long time, I just thought he insulted me because maybe I was really sucky. But apparently, he was just being that way with a lot of people and trying to get a handle on the parts he was playing. So that made me feel so good. But that didn't happen until Bruiser. And I thought, I've been feeling badly about that all these years. Like, oh no, George was like, oh no, man. Let me tell you this one. Let me tell you that one. So, like, oh, okay, it wasn't me. Like, no, it was everybody. Like, okay.
Well, from your point of view, was it more of Timothy Hutton trying to be a perfectionist, or was it him being a diva, or a little bit of both? A little bit of both, probably. Yeah. It's so difficult. Like when you're an actor and you're trying to find something, and you need your space, or you need something. And I remember one take he did, and he really went over the top, like just nuts with it, because he gets very upset as the character during the scene. And he did this take that I thought looked really ridiculously bad. And I thought it was. But he did it. And it's not in the movie. They used a different take. But the cool thing, and I always remember this about him and admire him for it, he went for
for it, and he got this huge, crazy, over the top through the tent performance. And then they used one of the takes after that, but maybe he wouldn't have gotten the take after that had he not done the big one. But he was really, really trying things, and I remember I've always had a bad knee at that time, even then. But I had to squat in the corner, and for my opening, it was like I was hooking up to the phone, and I stand for my first line and walk across the room or whatever it was, and it went on, and so the longer I squatted, the less quickly I was able to rise. Because, like, okay, getting up again. But he was just trying different things to get the best out of himself. So, and I've seen performances of him before and after, and he's just a really wonderful actor. And it was a tough thing, I guess, for him. We never talked personally, so he was just going through that stuff. But that's the cool thing, because you see that type of approach. And Amy Madigan, as his wife, was certainly playing a character who was not as pushed to the wall, but quite pushed to the wall. And she and I would just sit on the steps and chat. And she was completely relaxed between takes. So, everybody works differently, and everybody needs to do what they need to do, as much as possible, and to get there, and it's always a team effort, so.
Well, that kind of leads me into the topic that I always love talking about. I know we've talked about this over the years, but you brought up Bruiser.
Yeah.
So, talk to me a little bit. How did you get involved with that? Because this was George's first Canadian production.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about how you got involved with that?
I had written a script that George wanted to direct called The Collaboration, and I had sent it to him, and it wasn't read for the longest time, and finally Chris Romero read it and called me, and she was very enthusiastic about it. She said, "I'm going to make George read this." And so George read it, and George wanted to direct it. And because of that process beginning, me as a writer on that, I met George's partner, Peter Grunwald, who was a really talented producer, one of the funniest guys I've ever met, really nice. And he and I became very good friends. We actually worked on several different screenplay projects together over the years. And so I knew Peter. And so when the thing came that when the project came about that they were going to do Bruiser, he said, "Hey, there might be something in this for you." And he sent me the script, and I read it, and it was like, "Oh my God, I'd love to do this. This would be great." And they were casting in Canada, and there were different rules through the years about how many American actors, how many Canadian actors, and all of that. I was actually supposed to be in Land of the Dead after that, at some point, years after that, and they had too many American actors with Dennis Hopper and John Leguizamo, and I lost my part in Land because they had to go to Canadian. But at this point, there was there's a couple of roles open. Tom Bertram was open for Bruiser, so I ended up getting cast as Bertram. And went up to Toronto and shot, and came back to the States, and then went back to Toronto. So that was a great, fun experience. But it was through that process of I wrote a script, and that's how when people say, how do you get this or do that? It's like, you can't repeat that. I wrote a script and I sent it to George. He was busy. Chris read it. It's this weird trajectory. Things happen and something else happens, and then you meet somebody and somebody says, "Hey, would you like to do this?" So it was one of those things.
I've got to ask, because I'm a great admirer of your goatee in the film.
Thank you.
I mean, that
I have it here on my desk.
I mean, that is one of the most impressive power goats committed to celluloid. And I just got to ask, did you just walk on the set looking like that, or was that a direction of the art department, or?
No, I wanted to have it. There was one of those things, like when you get a part, like, well, any part, you look at it and think, okay, what can make this different? Because Bertram was such a doormat for Peter Stormare, and he's the guy who finally, said, okay, I'm getting out of here. But the whole thing, he could be so stepped on, be such a weenie. And I thought, well, they had these great suits too, one of which I bought for myself afterwards. So they had this, because the setting was a fashion magazine, they had great clothes, and I thought he should have an attempt to look cool. It may not work, but he should have the goatee as his attempt to be a cool guy too, and fit in, because he really doesn't, and he can't stand up to Stormare, and do those things. So the goatee was my idea, and I asked. I think I had a beard, and I wanted to shave down to a goatee. And I remember we sat in the office. The cool thing about Bruiser was I got to be around for a lot of it, through the production of it, and discussions about the story and stuff like that to an extent. But I remember George and Peter and a few other people in the room. I said I wanted to keep the goatee, and I said I wanted to keep it down on a little beyond the chin, a little way. And George says, yeah, because you want to I have the same thing. You want to cover, if you have any double chin, you want to cover your double chin, use the beard to cover that. Yeah. So we were like, comparing our beards and how we kind of try to look cooler with them. But it was my idea, and they let me do it, and so it was a fun thing to do.
So that brings me to one of the questions I've been wanting to ask. What was it like working with Peter Stormare?
He was great to work with, and I heard, especially through Peter, that he was a nightmare for editing. So in terms of acting with him, you really didn't have to, okay, this is what we're going to do, and let's set this, and you know what the scene's about, and this is what's going to happen. Every single take would be different. And I remember when we did the scene by the swimming pool, he went to punch me in the stomach. And he wasn't really going to punch me in the stomach, but for a second there, I thought he was. And I flinched. I jumped back. And then he moved away, and I tried to follow him, but there was a pole there that was for a tent for part of the set. And I had to, maneuver myself around the pole. And it was quite, fun and funny to try to follow him and suck up to him with all that. And then we did it again, and he didn't do that. He did something else. But the fun thing about that was you didn't have to really do anything except go with whatever he was throwing at you, because he would throw something new out all the time. And so the old actor thing of you don't have to act, just react. With Peter, that's all you had to do. Just react to anything he throws at you, because he's a wild and crazy guy, and he was so much fun. The wacky thing, though, with the editing is, since he did everything different every take, he wasn't always matching. So when you act in a movie, if you pick up a cup on this word, when they turn the camera somewhere else, for a different setup, you have to pick up the cup on that word too. You turn your head to the left, you have to remember what you did. Otherwise, the editing doesn't flow. And that's one of the things. You have the script supervisor there to watch, but as an actor, you're watching that. You're, making sure that you're doing things pretty much the same way. And there's always, flubs or mistakes, and you can cut around it, or you notice them in the movies, little tiny things. But Peter he didn't really go with that, man. He just did whatever he wanted to do. And at one point, we were in the conference room scene, and they had a lot of the extras were sitting around a table. They were all playing the executives. And at one point, Peter had a line about something like, you have to have balls to be in this business. And he was standing by this 50-something-year-old woman who was an extra, who was sitting at the table. And when he said, you have to have balls, he dropped his pants at her face level, bare naked. frontal nudity right in this woman's face on camera. You have to have balls to be in this business. And obviously you can't use that because it's not going to be in, you can't really use that take, but he would do anything, but it made his performance spontaneous and fun to watch, even though I'm sure it took extra hours in the editing room. I mean, he would, at one point, I don't remember if it's in the movie but I remember him doing it. He was puffing on a cigar and he left the room for that take, and he played like he was a choo-choo train and just blowing smoke on his exit, so he was a lot. And at lunch, you'd have lunch with him, and he was like very normal, quiet, hardly talked. It's like really different than Milo, I think his name was. So as a guy, and he was very busy. I remember he was saying how many films he had done, and he had seen his family for a long time. And, you sort of got the feeling like, well, I'm, missing home. So you had Milo on set, and you had this sort of very introspective, quiet, soft-spoken guy at lunch,
How did George react to that? Because I know George was always up for, hey, George, why don't you try this? But when it seems like it's more spontaneous, how was his reaction to that?
Well, I think everybody was pretty much watching for it, because after a while, I know that I heard stories as people, oh gosh, how are they going to cut this? I don't know. But I think after a while, it was like, look, this is who he is. This is what he does, and he's giving them great stuff. So it wasn't like he was all over the place and just being sucky. He was doing really great stuff, except it wasn't going to cut together, and it was just like, you just have to watch, you just have to hope you get it, and you're sort of like wrangling, cockroaches, you sort of have to like keep, make sure that you get him walking out of the room, because you need that to cut, so, but I think once they got into what his style was, they just went with it and accommodated it with the knowledge that this is going to take longer in post-production, which was fine. It's like one of those things, better that than everything matches, but it's kind of bland, and bland he was not.
You got to spend some on-screen time with another Pittsburgh and Romero alumni, Tom Atkins.
Yes, Tom is just so nice, and I sound like such a nice person saying, "Oh, this person's so nice," but really, it was like all these folks. I mean, I found that most of the bigger actors, the big name actors, the talented actors are real sweethearts, and it isn't like, sure, they can relax and be nice now. I think they're real human beings. That's how they get to be good actors and successful. And Tom is just really, really a nice person. I saw him last year at Bingo O'Malley's memorial service at the City Theater in Pittsburgh. But he was quite fun, and he's like one of those gruff. He reminds me of like Robert Ryan or somebody, from that era. He just shows up and he's there. He's solid. He's real. He's fun, and he's a really nice person. Real charming guy.
Can you talk a little bit about working with Jason Fleming, and specifically that, I know the one scene where he kind of discovers you after you've witnessed what he's done?
Yeah, he was very interesting. He was very British, very polite, and I remember I was learning words from him because he asked me if I wanted a fag at one point, and I didn't know that meant cigarette, and I thought, what? I'm married, and no, and what? No. And nice strides. I didn't know strides were pants in England. I had never heard this. Strides. I didn't know what that meant. But he was just, we were back and forth. We were on equal playing field with him. So this is what he's going to do. This is what I'm going to do. It was more set, obviously, than with Peter. But it was very simple. So so many of those types of scenes, I think, work with the audience is expecting what they're expecting from the scene, from the context. So simply, going with that, and the setup is in the suspense of it, and in the story. So there was no big histrionics of preparation or, let's work this out or let's work that out. But I remember something he did at one point. We're talking, and he turned in the chair and dropped his arm and said something like, "Oh, Tom," whatever he said to me. But just that dropping of the arm, it was like this, what Chekhov would call a psychophysical gesture. It was such despair. And he was just such a wonderful actor, such a wonderful moment that it all just comes pouring out, And you really have to watch yourself. And something I've learned through the years acting-wise, you always, you watch yourself later, think, no, you should have done less. I mean, for me, when I watch myself, do less, just be there, just be there. So it's those big high notes that when you try to hit them, you can't try to hit them. You have to, what do you need to do? And with him, it was just just be there with him. He was just totally solid, really, really a good actor. And just a family guy, or he had a girlfriend, I think, at the time, but just talked to him about going home after the shoot and things like that. But just a very solid actor and very simple.
So, kind of building on that, with working with Jason, did George give you any direction in regards to that scene about whether or not you as the character saw the mask or just saw the character of Henry? Because I know a lot of people, it's very ambiguous, and George has his own view, but I didn't know if he kind of passed that along to you or left it up to you.
He totally left it up to me, and the thing with almost all directors is that I've worked with that have been good directors, like George certainly was, is that it would be in the casting. He would cast you, and you do what you want to do, and if you need to stand over there instead of over here, then that's part of the blocking, and that's what you have to do. But he directed basically in terms of the casting. He cast the person he wanted and let them do what they felt the character would do, and without any discussion before, during, after, nitpicking, or collaborating on this moment. It was like, hey, yes, you're playing it. Go. And I remember the thing about, that is an ambiguous thing. What am I seeing? Am I seeing a mask that I think is a mask? Or is he he's fine and he's just acting really, really strangely, and he catches me. But he just left it up to the individual moment, and I think so many of those things, that's sort of the point when it isn't like, hey, this is the right answer. It's going to be up to the audience. It's like the Lady and the Tiger, when that story with her lover's behind one door and the tiger's behind the other, and which one she opens, that's the one. Is she going to get the lover she can't have unless she picks him? But if she opens the door with the tiger, she's going to get eaten. And the end of the story is she opens the door, and that's it. And so that's sort of the way we played that, in terms of the audience, in terms of which one's right. Or did George have his feeling about it this way or that way? But I think the ambiguousness of it is better for me, that we're dealing with psychological things rather than the mask or the face gone thing. But again, that's a choice. It's not necessarily the only choice, because it's going to be what the audience takes away from it. So you could play it one way as an actor, but the audience could see it another way, and it's just equally as valid. It's like The Innocents, or the Turn of the Screw. Is the governess sexually repressed to the point that she's driving these two little kids nuts, or are they haunted? Are there ghosts? And if you watch that movie, The Innocents, Deborah Kerr, which is one of the scariest movies ever, or read the story upon which it's based, The Turn of the Screw, to Henry James, there's no pat answer, Yeah. What you take from it,
Yeah. So how was George I guess I want to say on set compared to, this is his first Canadian production versus working with a new crew versus working with a more familiar family-like atmosphere down in Pittsburgh.
When I was there, and they had started shooting before I got there, but when I was there, everybody was just moving like a well-oiled machine. There was no craziness. There was no like, oh my gosh, where's this? And we have to move locations, and we're like losing the light now, and we're stuck, and all that stuff. Everything was moving really, really well, and I can credit that to, I would say, George's demeanor as a person and as a filmmaker. Also, Peter Grunwald was a fabulous producer on that, and Ben Barinholtz was a producer on that, and Ben produced a number of movies with the Coen brothers, and he just passed away, I think it was last year or so, and he was really, really experienced as well, so everything worked amazingly well. And also, something that really helped me is that I remember we did a take, and Ben Barinholtz, who I was like, okay, that's Ben Barinholtz. He came over and complimented me on my acting, and I thought, and walked away. And I thought, no, it's Ben Barinholtz, and that type of friendliness, and just like, you don't see something and just say, okay, good, glad we got that one in the can. It was like people were supporting each other, and it was very, very smooth all the way through. There was one thing at the beginning for me when I was up there. We were in an office, and there was a guy who worked for George. He was his assistant, and I can't recall his name right now. Younger fella, really nice, and he was talking to George about the movie's not going to be bloody enough to please the fans, and George didn't want it to be. It was a whole different thing, for him. And this guy, whose name I can't recall, he had an idea, like somebody had a belly button ring. And he said, what if at one point it gets ripped out? And, we see this jet of blood as her belly button ring gets ripped out. That way the fans will still like you. George, because you're giving them the blood and the gore. And George didn't say no, but you could tell it was no. He was just like, oh, yeah, we could, But it was a different type of film for him, and he really stuck by his guns and made it the way he wanted to. And I'm really happy that you like it, because a lot of people expect the other thing, which he was brilliant at, but he wanted to do something different, and he did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know we've talked over the years about my love of Bruiser, and whenever I was around George, I didn't really talk about George's works with him, but I always brought up Bruiser from time to time.
Yeah.
And obviously, I went to Toronto a couple years ago, and I got to visit a bunch of the locations.
Oh, cool, yeah.
I got to go back to the house where the hot tub was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that ended up being a friend of mine. That was his house that George...
Oh, yeah. Cool.
And George gave him his director's chair.
Neat.
He imparted it to me, so we were up there, looking around. And that kind of led me to another question, because that's something I like to do. Were the offices of Bruiser a set, or were they in the building downtown?
There was a building downtown. That was where the offices were. They may have had some sort of set thing built somewhere. They did have a warehouse with sets. But I know that we were downtown, and we were also... It must have been two things, because I remember we were on a set in a warehouse for one scene, but we were also in the offices. So it was probably a little bit of both, depending upon, how the scene flowed or didn't. But part of it was definitely on location at a real office space downtown Toronto, and we did do part of it on a set there. And the hot tub was a real, as you know, the hot tub was a real hot tub. Actually, the hot tub was not really a hot tub. It was a cold tub, because we actually didn't get to the scene till like 4 in the morning. and they had to shut the heat off, because the bubbles made noise. So we started the scene, and the hot tub was like, they could keep it warm, and it's bubbling. And they realized that's going to be a sound issue, so they had to shut the hot tub off to lose the bubbles. But when they did that, they lost the heat. So it's 4 in the morning in Toronto, naked in a hot tub, and I have to stand up. And I'm not going to be on screen that way, but I have to stand up in front of 50 people. And it was like, and it's cold water, it's cold water. And I asked, guy says, can I get any sort of covering, here, something? Because, from the back, okay, but all these people are in front of me, so they gave me this little piece of pink satin on dental floss that wrapped around me. And they adhered it to me, and I stood up, and it twanged off on the first take. So we figured out how to. I sort of was grabbing the towel as I was standing up, as I recall. But that was a real location. But the other ones were the combination.
Well, you mentioned earlier working with Bingo O'Malley, and I noticed that you had a writing credit on Tom Savini's Chill Factor. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we wanted to do a series, and I wrote, I ended up over this long process of trying to raise funding, I came up with literally 90-something different story ideas, because it took 4 years or something. And I wrote House Call, and I don't write with people in mind, ever. But with this one I did. I wrote it for Bingo, and I wrote House Call with Bingo in mind, and I called him and I said, hey, I wrote this. Would you take a look at it? He said, I'd love to do it if you wrote it. I said, take a look at it first to make sure, but I'll send it to you. So I did, and Tom Savini directed it. Marty Schiff, Tom, and I produced it. We shot it in a trucking warehouse in Hopwood, PA, and it was this nice little. Tom's direction is masterful. I mean, you could stop that movie at any frame, and it's a beautiful shot. It's a beautiful picture. He did a great job with that, and Bingo was great in it. And so we had this one story, and we ended up putting it on as a Dead Time Stories episode when we did that years later, just because people hadn't seen it much, and I thought Tom did such a spectacular job. And Bingo was wonderful. And Bingo, actually, the kind of fun thing with that for me was I hadn't seen Bingo for a while. And he's playing an older guy, as he was. He was always an older guy. But he arrived, and he was he was very frail. And we were shooting it over 5 days in the summer. And it was hot, and he was wearing winter clothes and for the show, and he just was so frail, and we were all he's doing so well, but gee, Bingo looks like he's on his last legs there. And a week or so later, we shot the special features downtown Pittsburgh at a place called New Perspective. And Bingo came bouncing in. He was wearing a pink shirt, I remember, and he was full of life. And he was just acting that entire week. He was in character to a certain extent all the time. So he played it frail all the time. And he told me something which Bingo was so meat and potatoes in terms of just being there. But he said when he worked on a part, he would figure out what zodiac sign they are. Really? That seems very esoteric for somebody like Bingo to think about as an actor. But he would really get into those things. So
I don't have anything else, and Eric doesn't either. So did you want to take a minute and kind of tell us what you're working on, where we can find you? Or?
Yeah, a couple of things coming up as soon as we're allowed out of the house again. I was cast in a film called No Man's Ridge that Eric Red, who did The Hitcher, is directing. He also wrote it. It's a Bigfoot movie. I'll be shooting that in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So that'll be a lot of fun. Eric is so nice. We met at a screenwriting conference a couple of years back, and it was I've known him my whole life. In 5 minutes, he was really, really terrific. So, going to be doing that, and I'm also going to be doing a film called Straight to Hell. It's from a novel called That's slipping my mind. Something Remains, but by Gary Razor, and Gary wrote the screenplay Straight to Hell, which is about an Elvis wannabe serial killer type of thing. We're shooting it in Las Vegas, and again, once we get out of the house, and so they're in talks with an actor, who I can't say yet because it isn't a finalized deal, but it's close. So I can let you know if that actually moves forward with him. But that's with Vegas. And the other thing that I'm working on, just finishing up, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we just locked our final, we're in a rough cut, but it's pretty close to a final cut of a show that I produced and acted in called Actors On. And it's an educational pilot that we would like to do, teaching students about literature. So the first episode, the pilot, is Actors On Macbeth. And so that's a nice, scary play, should be up your alley. So we shot that, and we're doing the editing on that now. Also shot a little bit of it in Nepal, because I taught a class in Nepal, a screenwriting class in Nepal this past August with the Nepal Film and Cultural Academy. So we got to shoot a little bit of it over there. So that should be ready for consumption within the month, I would say.